Afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Norville Barrington. I serve as the chapter president of the Metro New York chapter of the National Black MBA. I want to welcome you to our Careers with series featuring CIBC, uh, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. We'll get started in a couple moments. We're going to give our guests time to join in, and we have a lot to talk about with our guest for today, George Francois, who is managing director. We'll go into his career. We'll go into CIBC in the United States, both in Chicago, New York, and ultimately Canada, worldwide. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we want you to be engaged with us. If you have any questions, please use the chat feature, as we're excited to get your feedback and, more importantly, answer some of the questions that you currently have. This is a great opportunity to learn about this great organization for those of you who are in capital markets and really want to understand how you can be a part of such a great organization. This is the opportune time. So we'll get started in a couple moments, and I'll also go over some upcoming events that we have scheduled with National Black MBA. For those of you who are very familiar with our organization, we have upcoming career coaching opportunities. For those of you who are looking to grow professionally, you'll also see opportunities within our virtual career fair, which is coming up in May the 23rd. If you have any questions in regards to career opportunities, especially as relates to CIBC, please email us at resumes@nyblackmba.org. In addition to that, you'll be able to access a special link which will have opportunities to see what's currently open within the organization. On this Monday, we're going to touch on a lot of different topics, from company size, culture, and George will go into that in a couple of moments. So we're going to get started now. And I just want to mention here the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce is one of Canada's largest banks, providing a large wide range of services, especially in the financial services for individuals, businesses, and institutions. They are based and founded in Toronto. We have a U.S. base for capital markets, which we're going to go over today, and their range of financial products include personal banking, business banking, wealth management, investment banking, and insurance. And today I am very happy, and this is over some time here, very happy to introduce George Francois, who's the Managing Director of Corporate Solutions Group in the Capital Markets Group in the United States, who's based in New York. And without further ado, welcome George to our stage. Good afternoon, George. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Norval. Good to see you. Good evening, everybody. I'm excited to be here to speak with you this evening about CIBC, about my career, to answer any questions that you might have about banking in general, CIBC in particular. I'm looking forward to this. So again, my name is George Francois, and I'm a managing director with CIBC. Specifically, my focus is in the corporate solutions group. So I cover corporate clients, specifically in the energy space. So my clients include producers of energy, so companies that actually go out and extract natural gas and other commodities, as well as users of those underlying commodities. Before we go into CIBC and delve a little bit deeper into the organization, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about how did I land at CIBC? So CIBC is the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. I've been with the firm for just over 28 years now, which is surprising to me that I would stay with an institution this long. But something about the institution that just attracted me to the platform and kept me on the platform once I joined. So I first started at the firm as an intern. I was getting my MBA from Fordham Business School in New York City, native New Yorker, and I had a network of colleagues, one of whom had joined CIBC in a group called the School of Financial Products. And this group was formed to basically support the various derivatives desks. This group held educational sessions in the various marketing centers in the U.S., New York, Houston, in California, as well as in Canada, in Calgary, Alberta, and other parts of the world, to help clients understand derivatives from beginning to end. So I did an internship with this group halfway through my MBA. And upon completing my degree, I was offered a full-time position with the School of Financial Products. I worked for that group for 2 years, learning about derivatives, but more importantly, learning about the organization and really understanding the organization. And it was a great time. I learned a lot about the markets in general. I did that for 2 years, and they offered me a full-time role on the commodity derivatives desk, specifically on the metals desk in Toronto. So I moved from New York to Toronto. Initially, that was supposed to be a 2-year stint, but there was some turnover in New York, and so I was asked to come back down to New York to pick up coverage in energy, as well as continue the coverage in metals. And I did that for a number of years, and then eventually phased off the metals part and focused exclusively on energy. So the question that I have here, the first question that I have here that I wanted to address is, so what attracted me to the platform? Like, what actually brought me to the firm? One, it was contact. So I didn't know much about CIBC at that time. But once I got in the door and understood the culture, the organization, the people, I was really drawn by the people. And I don't know if that sounds cliche or not, but for me, that was something that was real. Doing this role that I have as a marketer on a derivatives desk can be, I'm sure people will imagine, a very stressful, high-paced job. And I don't mind the high-paced, fast nature of the job, and the high levels of responsibility. But one of the things that I discovered about myself as I joined the workforce is that I did not want to be part of an organization where there was a high level of tension and unnecessary politicalness, amongst the colleagues. And I really did not feel that at CIBC. It's not perfect, but it is a fine organization. And I picked that up right away. And so that attracted me to the business, and that kept me sticking around, for the amount of time that I've been with the organization. The other thing that I would mention that is a differentiator for CIBC is that while it is a large organization, at last count, the organization employs close to 50,000 employees worldwide. Even though it's a large organization, it still has an entrepreneurial feel to it. And that was important to me because I talked to, other colleagues at different institutions. And one of the things that I came to understand is that at a lot of the large bulge bracket companies, you tended to have a high level of specialization, right? So you did one job, you learned that job extremely well, but that's all you did, right? So if you covered corporates that had 3-year deals to do in commodities on the producer side, that's all you did. You became a specialist at that, but there wasn't a whole lot of lateral movement. And to me, that was something that was less interesting as compared to what my role is at CIBC, where I have a fairly broad mandate across a number of client segments, across a number of commodities, and there's opportunity for for growth, for expansion, for interacting with individuals at various levels of the organization, and that's something that was extremely important to me. So the agenda here I had was I wanted to spend some time introducing the team at CIBC. So that's me for this call. So we did a bit of that. I gave you a brief overview of my background with the firm. So really, this is the first job that I had out of business school, and I've been with the firm for close to 30 years. So some background on CIBC. So CIBC is one of 6 major banks in Canada. So you think about the landscape in Canada and compare that to the US. So Canada is kind of like an oligopoly in that, you have five major banks, six in total, um, that are competing for market share in Canada. And the challenge with that is that, from year to year, it's hard to make significant inroads to change what your percentage is of the overall Canadian wallet, right? And so one year you might have 15% of the market. Next year you might have 20% of the market, but you're pretty much capped in terms of how much business you can do, just because that business tends to get spread across the few players in Canada. So you contrast that with the US, where there are hundreds and hundreds of institutions. The landscape is quite different. But the fact that Canada is effectively an oligopoly is important. Why is it important? From an employee standpoint, it's important because all firms want to grow, and all firms talk about growth and expansion and the like, and that's important and that's true. With Canadian banks and CIBC in particular, that growth has to happen outside of the U.S., right? Because the market is already saturated in Canada. So opportunities exist outside of Canada for growth. The firm has announced, publicly announced some very ambitious growth plans. That can't happen by focusing solely in Canada. And so what that means is you have a lot of attention to the US in particular. You have a lot of resources, so there's a lot of capital supporting our business. There's a lot of focus from senior management on what we're doing in the US and how we can actually help, how they can actually help and grow the platform. And as someone who sits in the US office, or in New York office, that's what you want, right? You want those resources coming to New York in the US, and you want that management focus and you want that management attention, because that means support for your product, that means support for your business, that means the ability to move quickly on new ideas and expansion plans, because we're needed to help support the ambitions of the bank as a whole. So here, just general information about the company. So large market cap, 45 billion. I mentioned earlier we have close to 50,000 employees, 14 million clients. So clients is something that is also at the core of everything that CIBC does as an organization. That is important as well. So pretty much the entire time that I've been with the firm, I've been in a client-facing role, and through that time, I've come to learn that the clients really are at the center of everything that we do as an organization. This is different from other organizations that have a trading first focus, where their traders are taking positions in underlying assets and then looking to clients as a way to offload risks that the traders do not want. CIBC has the opposite business model. So we have a portfolio of clients that we service as best as we can over time. We develop a track record, we develop credibility, and our focus is primarily to service those clients from an execution standpoint, to do so in a professional manner, to provide good pricing, to provide market intelligence, and to service those clients so well over time that we become one of their go-to players for whatever their capital markets and other needs are in the financial landscape. Again, so just a slide just on our geographic footprint. So as Norville mentioned at the top of the call, Canadian bank based in and headquartered in Toronto. As for the capital markets business, in the U.S., we have offices primarily in two areas, in New York and Chicago. There are other areas, but I would say that New York and Chicago are the main focal points for capital markets. In the New York office, we have close to 300 people as part of our platform in capital markets. And then the New York office in general, so that includes other lines of businesses, we have close to 400 people. Another sign of our commitment to the U.S. region and the New York office, I'm sitting on a newly renovated trading floor. that has been renovated with, state-of-the-art monitors. Every person on our floor has a standing desk, 3 large monitors. We have places for collaboration across the floor. They did a really fine job with that. So just another example of the amount of commitment in terms of capital to our business. So, all right. So drilling down a little bit more. So when we talk about capital markets, I'm really talking about 3 lines of business. The first is global markets. So global markets houses our derivatives platform, and that derivative platform will cover a number of asset classes. So under that umbrella, you'll have foreign exchange, you'll have interest rates, you'll have equity derivatives, you will have commodities, which is my area. In commodities, we have energy, which is my specific area, but you'll also have metals derivatives. So that is all housed under the global markets umbrella. In addition to that, so part 2 under capital markets, you'll have corporate banking. So that is a lending function to corporations, and that's divided up into various verticals or industry segments. So whether it's consumer businesses, whether it's technology, telecom, whether it's industrials, any sort of lending type functions on a corporate level, think corporate revolvers is done under our corporate banking segment. And then lastly, you have corporate investment banking. So that's investment banking as many of you know it, helping with M&A, advisory transactions on companies looking at mergers, asset divestitures, and the like. And that covers various industry segments. So those are the 3 components of what I refer to as capital markets. So you have global markets, global corporate banking, and global investment banking. Okay, so I spoke to this already. So under the global markets umbrella, you have the various asset classes that we're involved in. One of the things that's unique about CIBC is that while you do have a number of asset classes listed here, we're not in every market, right? So we tend to look closely at markets where we feel like we can have a meaningful impact in terms of what our customers have a need for. And then we look to enter those markets. We're not looking to be in every single market because our view is just that, being spread too thin, where there aren't high levels of concentration of customer interest, really spells a recipe for disaster, right? You're trading in markets where you don't have, the regular deal flow that would, allow you to be involved in the market to the degree that will give you information and help you manage your positions effectively. We look to where the customers are, and that's how we decide the areas where we will be involved in terms of a business. So I put a slide here on culture just because it's topical. I'm sure you've listened to other calls similar to this, and people will speak to culture. What I'll say is that from a culture perspective, you hear individuals within the organization talk about culture from top to bottom. So from the CEO down to all levels of the organization, you hear people talk about culture. Culture is extremely important to the organization. It's important to me as an individual and an employee here at CIBC. There's a strong commitment to diversity. And that has only accelerated over the last, 5 to 7 years. Admittedly, when I first joined the organization out of business school, our floor was a lot smaller, but the number of people of color on that floor was extremely small. So it was myself and probably 3 or 4 other individuals. That's grown significantly over the years, and there are plans to continue to grow that on a go forward basis. The theme for diversity is important to the organization because, there's a belief that, with diversity comes different perspectives, different points of view. And when you take those different points of view and you put them together, you get better collaboration, you get better ideas, and you get, better products, you get better connectivity with customers. It serves us better, it serves our customers better, and it serves our shareholders better as well. The way that we, or some of the ways that we look to advance um, our objectives as it relates to diversity, there are a couple of things that we do. The first is with what we call our people networks. So these are our diversity groups. So other shops will call them affinity groups. We call them people networks. So there is a Black employee network at CIBC. That's a people network. There's an Asian employee network. There's a network for women, Latinx community. I happen to be co-chair of CIBC's Black employee network. That is a responsibility that I picked up in 2019. And I have to say that has been an extremely rewarding part of my job. It's allowed me to meet individuals in the organization that I otherwise would not have met. It makes me feel good because I know that I'm having an impact in terms of advancing the firm's diversity objective. That's important to me. And it's just something different than the normal hustle and bustle of, doing transactions, making money, which is great. But this just adds more of a personal sort of human element for me, which I find extremely rewarding. The second thing that we're doing, and I've had a role in this as well, is we're expanding the scope of schools where we recruit. In the past, it has been a lot of Ivy League institutions, and it really stopped there. And there was an understanding that if we're going to, diversify our workplace, we need to diversify the schools where we recruit. And so, as an example, we've done a lot of work with Hampton University. I'm proud to say I'm part of the team this year that established a scholarship for Hampton students enrolled in their 5-year MBA program. It's a scholarship that we award to 5 students who will initially join as interns in our commercial banking training program. It is a 2-year commitment. So 1 year, they're going to do a stint in commercial banking. And then in year 2, they have the option to potentially move around in other parts of the organization, depending on, one, their interest level and availability of positions in other areas. And then the third part, the third way that we are advancing our diversity strategy is with our external partnerships. So this year, I'm proud to say that we established a corporate partnership with the National Black MBA Association. I'm very happy about that. We have sponsorship agreements with the Chicago office that started first. And then within the last month and a half, we established a similar relationship with the New York office, with the New York chapter. I'm sorry, with the New York chapter. And I'm very proud about that. And the focus there, why do we do that? One is, if we look at a lot of our diversity efforts to date, a lot of it initially focused on universities and younger talent into the organization, i.e., students fresh out of school. There was understanding that we need to make sure that we had a pipeline into organizations that had some experience under their belt, with people that had experience under their belt. And this really started with me, where I had a specific search that I was conducting on our desk. We needed to hire someone at the director level, and the job posting came out. We knew that we had this role to fill, and I remember scrambling at the time to try to find the network of people that I could tap into to get this mid-level person to even interview. And I just didn't have those connections yet, right? So I was kind of scrambling. And as you can imagine, when there's a role that needs to be filled within the organization, especially on the trading floor, we want to hire those people immediately. And so I find myself, fighting against, swimming against a tide of let's close this deal, let's get this done, with me trying to grab on and find a network where I could tap into potential mid-level talent that I could interview for this role, and I just couldn't do it fast enough. I could that relationship, those relationships just didn't exist, and so I was extremely excited when we formed this partnership with the Black MBA Association, because this gives us a way to tap into to people who are looking for opportunities, but have some experience under their belt. We'll also continue to recruit for entry level positions, but we just had a huge gap when it came to mid level individuals. So I'm happy about that. So let's see, what else do we have here? So in terms of open opportunities, so at a high level, what I wanted to do was kind of scope out a few things that come to mind. I would say just focus kind of generally upon what's listed here. There are ways that you can connect into the organization to look at specific roles, but I think the takeaway from this slide is that one, because of what I said at the outset in terms of the amount of capital and the amount of growth that is to happen within the organization is going to happen primarily in the US. So all of the areas that I mentioned with respect to capital markets will be hiring in some capacity over the next 2 to 5 years. I got some stats from my HR colleagues, and he mentioned to me that over the last 4 years, we've increased our footprint within capital markets. So the number of people in our capital markets platform over the last 4 years, we've increased that by 50%, 50%. So that's an annual growth rate of about 12% per year over that 4-year period. So that's just tremendous. Going forward, there's going to be opportunities in our financial solutions group. So individuals across various desks that are covering clients that are not corporate, but financial institutions. So, insurance companies, private equity companies, and the like. There will be opportunities in energy and renewable space, asset-backed security space. Project finance will be a big part of our expansion plans. And then what we refer to as some of the infrastructure groups. So the groups that support the capital markets business. So that means business management, that means legal, compliance, documentation, and the like. I will put in our chat here to this meeting a link where you can access specific roles at CIBC. You can filter it by region. You can filter it by underlying asset class. That link, I'll actually post it right now. So you can take a look at that. And then we will also be posting positions as they open up on the Black MBA web portal. So we'll post those open positions directly on your portal. So you'll be able to access them a couple of ways. My ask is that if you see positions open and you're interested in applying, do the official channels, online, but also don't hesitate to drop me an email and just let me know that you're doing so that I can give our recruiters a heads up to let them know that that you're doing so, and that to just give them an understanding of, how that was sourced specifically through our corporate relationship with your organization. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and that is a way that you can reach out to me directly after you've applied to an open position. So with that, I think I can pause and I can turn it back to Norval. And if there are specific questions that you have, I'm happy to answer them at this time.
And there was a lot of information that you provided, and one of the key things is what the outlook is as regards to career opportunities. One of the things that people are interested in is longevity. 27, 28 years with one organization is nothing to sneeze at. What have you seen as we get the questions coming in through the chat here? What are some of the things and the ebbs and flows you've seen in terms of people being successful, not only then, but as we go into a new stage in fintech and new opportunities? What should people look at in terms of core soft skills or hard skills that can propel them to have a career such as yours, especially at this company?
Yeah, I think some of it might sound cliche, some of it might sound basic, but it is true that relatability, right? Getting to know people on a fundamental level and letting your personality shine through is really, really, really important. And it was something that I had to learn as I kind of went through my career. So during that 28-year period, there was a period of time where I did what many people do when they start a job and embark on a career. And that was, okay, I got my foot in the door. Now, the first thing is, okay, let me just do a good job and let me not mess something up, right? And you go through years of doing that. And you also go through years, I know I did, of keeping your head down. Like there's this phrase, keep your head down, do a good job, focus. And it is true that that serves you for a specific period of time, but there's a period of time where it no longer serves you, right? And you find yourself hitting a ceiling, and people don't necessarily tell you that you've hit that ceiling, right? So I would say that another thing that helps with longevity is self-reflection and understanding what your brand is within the organization and breaking out of the mold of, hey, I'm just going to keep my head down and do a good job. It's more than that. You have to tell your story. And I learned that for a couple of years. I had to learn that the hard way, right? I thought I was doing a great job, and I got a review, and there was one review, and I will never forget. I got a review, and like, the tone of the review and the feedback was almost 180 degrees away from what I was expecting based on like the effort that I was putting in and the results that I thought I was getting. I was doing the wrong things. I was doing things that maybe weren't valued by them. They weren't necessarily the right things. And it wasn't until I started to own and have more of constructive dialogue with managers around, okay, what are your expectations of me? How am I doing? Having those check-ins, telling my story and not leaving it for others to tell that story for me. Doing those things will help you with your longevity.
And I think that's important. It's a reminder to everyone, you have to be your own um, advocate, right? You have to put points on the board, but you ultimately have to be your own advocate. You have to be your own newscaster, your broadcaster. And that's critical. And I'm glad you mentioned that. One thing that's important here is certifications, qualifications. So we have Barbara who has a question here. Being certified an accountant, as an accountant, CPA, or certified planning advisor, or other certifications, what's key right now in terms of the markets, and what should people come in with?
So you don't necessarily have to come in with a certification. I do know that for well, I shouldn't say you don't have to, but in some of the areas you may have to. I know that for like if you are working in FX sales or interest rate sales, you might need to have a Series 7 or a Series 63 certification. If you are in private wealth, you may need to have certifications around in the area of financial planning or some discipline as it relates to private wealth. I don't know if I'm lucky or unlucky, but for my specific area, we're not required to have any specific certifications. There's sort of training that we have to do every 3 years, and we have to pass a course. But in terms of having a Series 63 or a Series 7, for commodities in particular, you don't have to have those degrees. And then as far as having a CPA, it really depends on the function, right? So I would say you don't necessarily need to have one if you're embarked in a career in sales and trading, but if you are in a specific role, maybe in business management, it may not hurt to have, a CPA or a degree in accounting, but I wouldn't say that it's a requirement.
And thank you for that. And this question here is from Tonya, and this is loaded, but ultimately, talking about your career, you built out a great career. So for a person that is maybe in commercial underwriting, right, and works at a Canadian bank, what are some unnecessary political barriers that you have to navigate towards, right, strategically? And then ultimately, she's been in the company for about 2 years and works hybrid in the Northeast, typically outside of out of market commercial credit deals. How do you tackle issues as it relates to culture? And I know culture is so important, as it relates to companies that are coming inside the United States, outside, of course. So can you touch on culture, how you've been able to navigate in your career so far?
Yeah, so culture is an interesting one, right? And so it's one where if I were to try to change culture as an individual in a sea of 50,000 people, I'm not going to be able to do it. It has to start at the top. It really, really does. And it filters down, right? The leadership sets the tone in terms of culture, right? So we have at CIBC, there's a culture of innovation. There's a culture of inclusiveness. There's a culture of cooperation and coordination. So once that's set at the top, then it's my responsibility as an individual to help to actually work those work that situation. So you start with your manager, right? So you start with the key decision makers in your specific sphere of influence, and they need to know you, right? So set up coffee chats, meet with them. I know you said you're hybrid, but a lot of firms are actually wanting people to come back into the office. So spend more time in the office, sitting down with the key stakeholders in the business, and let them understand who you are as an individual, and let your commitment to growing and furthering your career shine through in your engagement with them. And also ask probing questions about what they value as managers and individuals within your organization, right? What do they value? What do they need to see from you? And I think doing those things will help in terms of navigating the politics. At the end of the day, we all have a job to do, and if you're doing your job well, but also telling the story and meeting with the stakeholders, I think you'll be in good shape.
I like when you talk about the value and asking them what value are they looking for, right? What are they looking to pull? And most times as individuals, we, as you mentioned, you stay in your corner, you do your job, but is that the job that they value? Is that something that they're looking for you to do? It may say that in the job description, but what is really the value that they want? And I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm taking notes as well. Now, and ultimately, when we look at opportunities from New York and Chicago, can you tell me the difference between the two cities as it relates to the offices? Can you just touch on um, either open positions per se, or more so culture of different areas within the organization, so our
Yeah.
audience gets a better sense of that?
Yeah, sure. So the Chicago office came about from an acquisition, right? So CIBC bought a bank called the Private Bank in 2017. And so with that came a number of offices in various states around the country, the main one being Chicago. So when I think about the New York office is very capital markets heavy. It's capital markets presence, private wealth presence. In Chicago, it's very commercial banking heavy. So there are branches in Chicago. So a lot of, community banker type positions in that office. There is a capital markets business in Canada, in Chicago as well. It's a smaller group, so I think that group is less than 10 people, if I had that number right, in Chicago. But there's also a private wealth practice there. So I would say probably the biggest business in Chicago would be on the commercial banking side and personal banking side, smaller capital markets business, and a private wealth footprint. Whereas in New York, you have a large capital markets business with close to 300 people, private wealth, and other businesses as well.
Now, also, can you touch on the supporting functions in finance? Of course, you have analytics, you have IT, you have so many different opportunities to support, right, the vision, support capital markets. What's the culture? What's the appetite for individuals that are looking to be part of fintech, be part of financial markets, capital markets, but more in a supportive function?
Sure, sure. So, as you grow a desk, you need people to help support that business. We call that business management. And so we have, let's see, probably 5 or 6 folks in business management that I can think of in the New York office. So as we grow the platform, as we enter new markets, into new products, the level of business management that we need to support those businesses will increase. Another support function will be documentation, right? So every deal that we do gets governed by what we call an ISDA agreement. So International Swaps and Derivatives Association. That's the master agreement that covers our products. we need lawyers we need lawyers to execute those, right? So we have, 3 or 4 lawyers within the bank, and their job is to execute those agreements. They process modifications to those agreements. So that's an important part of our business. Back office is huge, right? So whether it's trade processing, trade reconciliation, trader position reporting, that's huge, right? It's a vital part of our platform, because if you think about a life cycle of a transaction, so I'm in a sales role. So I have clients that I interact with, they do transactions. I have a system where I input the details into that system. We have redundancies that are purposely put into that so that we can catch errors. Our trader will input the deal in a different system as he knows it, and those systems talk to each other and they match. If there's a problem, someone needs to identify there's a break, and there's a discrepancy in terms of, how I see the deal versus how the trader sees the deal. We have an entire back office and middle office function whose job it is to do those reconciliations, to do position reporting for traders, so that traders know, am I long or short this commodity, as I start the day, because that drives what they need to do in the marketplace. If that position reporting is incorrect and that trader's buying when they need to be selling, that impacts the bottom line. So a number of important functions that I would categorize as support functions are available as well.
Now, you also have those individuals who have maybe years of experience in the middle or the back office, and now are looking to get to the front office and the trading and sales. So, what advice would you give for someone who has maybe like 10 years of experience in more middle and back, but really is excited about an opportunity to get into the front office or even sales or trading?
Yeah, so you got to work on that one, right? So like they have a specific skill set that is, they've devoted a number of years in terms of the support function. I've seen it happen, right? So what you have to do is, first of all, you have to learn what the new job that you're trying to get into entails, right? So part of that can be, okay, as a support person, I have access to all this information that tells me what that job entails, right? So now I'm going to learn as much as I possibly can, and then I'm going to let it be known, right? So maybe it's, you look across the various desks that you support, and maybe there's that one salesperson that you have a personal rapport with, right? Or that one trader that you just happen to have a personal rapport with. Tap that person on the shoulder and say, hey, look, can I sit down with you for 15 or 20 minutes? I'm kind of interested in doing this. Can you give me some advice on how I can make that step and transition from what I'm doing, which I like doing, but I see my career going in this direction? 9 times out of 10, people would love to sit down with you and talk about what they do and how they can help. And here's the thing, you're a known commodity, you're a known person, right? So they know you. While you're not necessarily in the front office, you have a 10-year track record. They didn't keep you around for 10 years for nothing, right? So you have a 10-year track record of performance that you can use, that adds to your credibility around your candidacy to make that leap. But I would say get the information that you have access to, have those conversations with individuals that are in that role right now, and also your manager. Say, hey, look, I'm interested in staying with the organization, but I have aspirations to do this. Help me chart a course on how to get there.
And that was perfectly well said. And for those of you who are looking to position yourself, for a person who's been at the organization for 27, 28 years, George has really given us some information, given us some insight, and that kind of leads us to you talked about your longevity, you talked about the ebbs and flows. Now let's talk about, you mentioned diversity, but ultimately, how does that really show up um, at this organization? I know you mentioned the ERG group, the Fannie group, but how does that really show up for individuals that are looking to come into the organization and ultimately see an organization that's taking the proper steps in order to promote that within the organization?
Yeah, so it shows up in terms of our engagement with internal folks within the organization, right? So we've created spaces where people of particular backgrounds can get together and collaborate and talk about issues that are important to them. We hire people to come into the organization to speak to specific topics that are important. I'll never forget one of the most interesting events that we did was during COVID, right? And so we invited a panel of medical experts to come in and sort of demystify some of the questions that were prevalent in the African American community around the efficacy of the vaccine, right? And it all started with a conversation that I had in my doctor's office, where the nurse who was drawing my blood shut the door and looked at me and asked me whether I intended to get the vaccine or not. And she had a question as to whether she was going to take it. And I'm like, okay, this conversation that we're having, I know is happening in our community at various levels. And as it turned out, a colleague that I went to school with, a classmate from school, um, his specialty is infectious diseases. He has a PhD, and he posted something on social media about demystifying the vaccine. I brought him in, and we had hundreds and hundreds of people who tuned into this call, both from the African American community and outside, because other communities, they didn't understand that, right? Vaccines out, you take it. But the reality was, in our community, I'm speaking from personal experience, there was not necessarily this mad rush to go out and be the first one to take the vaccine because of the historical relationship that our community has had with vaccines, right? That was important, right? So that's how that showed up. It shows up in terms of engagement with, HBCUs. So going and speaking to students at Hampton University's 5-year MBA program and talking to them about our platform, why we're different than some of the other organizations. It comes up in this meeting that we're having right now, right? So engaging with you and your membership. Really, it's an inside out focus. And I think there's just a number of ways that that shows up. It shows up in interactions with senior management, where I'm part of a group called the Culture Council, where like senior folks within the organization have formed a group of, senior leaders and others within the organization to talk about, okay, what are the specific challenges that we need to be focused on? Like how do we strip down a lot of the rhetoric? If it's funding that we need, if it's a decision that we need to be made, how do we do that? How do we streamline that so that we can be impactful? These are all things that are happening within the organization, and I think that's how we show up.
And I want to just give my praises to the Hamptonians that are members, and ultimately the Hampton University collegiate chapter, which is the only collegiate chapter that we have within the National Black MBA. They have been running a excellent student organization down there. And for those members who are part of Fordham University, the Fordham Business School, which has been a big supporter of our Leaders for Tomorrow program for many, many years. We have many relationships with Fordham University. And I had to mention those two. Those are two strong organizations, two academic organizations that we definitely are happy to support and have been big supporters of NYBLACKMBA. And I know before we go here, and I want to make sure I at least allocate some more time here if there's any more questions here. So before you go, what's the call to action? We have all of these international banks that are now coming to the US market. We have so much that's happening within AI, fintech, technology. We're in a interesting economy where decisions are being made, decisions are being held. It's a political, it's an election year. We don't run away from the status of what's going on in the world per se. But what's the call to action for those individuals who are looking to join this organization, and why now?
Yeah, so why now? Why not now, right? Like no better time than the present. The call to action I would say is to lean in, right? So lean in. If you're thinking about a new opportunity, I've been at a place where, you think about, okay, am I in the right career? Do I need to be doing something different? If you're at that crossroad and you're thinking about a new opportunity, I would say lean into it. Find out. There's no harm in getting information. There's no harm in, sticking your neck out there and trying new things, meeting new people, expanding your network. I would say, given everything that's happening in the world, in the economy, election year, all of that. That's what, if I've learned nothing else, is you got to be happy with what you're doing. You have to have a level of fulfillment in what you're doing. And so if you think that, if that exists outside the walls of where you're currently working, lean in and really reach out and make those connections and have those conversations and see if there are things outside of where you currently are that that might be more fulfilling to you. In terms of the call to action to senior management within the organization, one of the things that I like to do is to make sure that we're not getting rhetoric and no action, right? So I'm very fortunate that we have several senior folks within the organization. They put their talk matches their walk. And so one of the things that I definitely do, though, is to make sure that that continues to be the case, right? So in 2020, a lot of folks picked up the banner and tried to advance this cause. You hear reports about maybe firms are dialing that back, just given the change in the climate and things that have been happening with, the Supreme Court as an example. But this organization, continues to lean in. And as far as I can tell, they have not, taken their foot off of the pedal. And one of the things where I, make sure I engage with them is I want to make sure that that remains the case going forward.
We thank you so much, not only for your time, but for your transparency. I think it's so important as we go into opportunities and look at career opportunities. People don't apply to jobs, people apply to cultures. And this is a culture. And George Francois, we thank you so much for opening the doors and opening the conversation. And for those of you who are looking to join, I'm going to post again. We're going to post again the email address, which is George's email address, is his first name and his last name, which I'll post in a couple moments. And then for those of you who are looking at specific roles, we'll actually post that link as well. Post this session. We're also going to send out an email, which will have full details on how you can re-engage and continue the conversation. This is a great time to explore career opportunities with the partners of National Black MBA, specifically the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, where there are a ton of career opportunities for those of you who are in finance, for those of you who are in support roles, for those of you who are looking to transition. George, we thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you not only at more events, but ultimately continue a conversation with CIBC.
Thank you, Norville. Thank you, everyone who attended. I really enjoyed myself, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.
And again, for those of you who are looking at career opportunities, please email your resume at resumes@nyblackmba.org. Again, we will have George's email available for you. I'll post it again. This way you're able to connect with him for the further questions. There's additional link I also want to show you here is a link for career opportunities within capital markets and other opportunities within CIBC. My name is Norville Barrington. I serve as the chapter president of the Metro New York chapter of National Black MBA. It is an honor to serve you as in this capacity, more importantly, to provide you with information that will allow you to grow and continue your career journey. On behalf of our executive team, our chapter, George Francois, our new corporate partner, CIBC, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, we thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. And for those of you who want to retune to this, we'll send you a link so you can replay this and learn more about this great organization. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to connecting you again with NY Black MBA.